Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going. What's going on, Wild Fam? I know as well as anybody that a great night's sleep is extremely important. I've tried sleeping in caves that were negative degrees. I've slept under the hot desert sun and piles of ants. And I know that a bad night's sleep can really affect your ability to recover, move your body, and communicate with others. And that's why I have decided to partner up with Lagoon Sleep. Lagoon offers a personalized quiz to match you up with the pillow that best suits your needs. This one right here, this is the Lemur. This is a eco-friendly option that I chose, and it's made from bamboo and recycled microfibers. There's also the ability to fill your pillow up more or less depending on how much volume you're looking for. So if you guys are in the market for an excellent pillow, one that has a lot of love and care and time put into it, check out Lagoon. Right now, you guys can use code WYLD at the link in the show notes, and you will get yourself 15% off. That's code WILD. Thank you guys for watching. Let's do the show.
That's one of the things that people don't realize about the beauty of podcasting is that you're capturing a conversation with a friend or a story that you can never relive. And that's why I love this medium of storytelling, because this I'll be 90 years old and go back and listen to this conversation and be like, or share it with my family. Like, I can't remember these stories, but here's a recording of it.
Yeah. I've heard this thing, like, if you have a podcast, get both your parents, whatever living grandparents you have, do a sit down with all of them, and you don't have to release it. It's like, just get them on there, get the recording done, and just sit there. And I mean, with some of them, you don't need to explain really what's going on. Just like bring them in, sit them down, and just like start having a conversation and just see where it goes.
That's a really good idea. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna record a conversation with my mom.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to do that with everyone. You know, whether or not it's like in the jive of this podcast, just have a conversation where
that's a great idea.
Can share it for years to come.
I love that.
Are we live? Yeah. Okay. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for coming on. You're a huge inspiration to so many people, both in the running world and outside of the running world. So first, let's just introduce you at face value. Tell the people who you are, what you do, and tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah,
so name is Don Reichelt. I guess I run a lot. I'm a competitive trail ultra runner. Have a pretty wide resume of races I've done, from one of the few Americans to run sub 8-minute mile pace for 100 miles on trail, to most recently setting multiple world records on an assault runner in New York City, and just a lot of stuff in between. And I do this all while also working full-time job and having side hustles and just living life to the fullest.
Awesome, man. So take us back a little bit to, like Don before the world records and the medals and stuff. Were you, what kind of kid were you?
Active. Okay. ADHD kid from Iowa that I didn't spend a lot of time indoors. I grew up right when, Nintendo 64s or Segas and stuff, and all my friends were inside, and I was pretty much outside, even if it was just by myself. I remember I would just have a baseball and throw baseballs at mulch piles in my backyard and just always want to be active. And I was never super good at running as a kid, but I just loved moving constantly. My mom always jokes that I was running before I was walking almost, because once I would just get going, I would start falling over and my legs would just keep moving and I would run across the room before I fell over.
That's amazing.
So I've been pretty much super active my whole life.
That's awesome. It's funny. I get that question too, is like, oh, you must have ran a long time. I'm like, no, I was fat. I wasn't really a runner. I loved being outside. The passion was there, but I didn't have any natural affinity towards long distance running, and it sounds like you kind of had that same experience.
Yeah, I never broke 20 minutes in a 5K in high school. I was okay on the track. But long distance running was pretty terrible for me, mostly because I think I had really bad coaches in high school, and they didn't give me the experience that running was a fun thing to do, or I could find enjoyment in running. It just seemed like I'm doing this thing and it's really hard, and they're making it mentally harder just by not being good people.
Yeah.
So I didn't love it. And yeah, so I went to college and actually walked onto the rowing team at University of Iowa and rowed for 4 years. And then after my final season, I got fat. I put on a ton of weight. I remember weighing in at 199.8 something pounds.
That's big for you.
Yeah. And so, I walk around at like 155, 156 right now. So, between the end of college and now, I've basically lost 50 pounds, and
wow.
I've been on this journey since then.
That's incredible. And I didn't have any idea about the rowing thing. So that kind of, do you think that helped build up your aerobic base, or, develop that engine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know what rowing is like. It's intense. It is hardcore stuff. So it definitely took what little foundation I had from running slow in high school to really, really far extremes of all in for 30 minutes, throwing up at the end, feeling what it feels like to redline for 30 minutes and thinking like, holy shit, that was terrible, but that was amazing. Let's do it again.
The type 2 fun.
Yeah. And then through rowing, I learned that, hey, if we're doing erg repeats, like, 500s, thousands, whatever, I might not be the fastest on the first 1, 2, or 3, but I didn't slow down for 6, 7, and 8. Right. I was able to keep that same effort, same pace. And I was like, okay, there might be something to this. Like, the longer we go, like I've never been fast, and I'll still say today, even we go out and run, I'm not fast. I just don't slow down.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the only skill I have in running is I can maintain better than most people. And that's over a marathon, that's over 100 miles, and hopefully coming up in May over 250 miles.
Yeah, that's a great teaser for what we'll get into. But I want to back it up a little bit here first. What was the lifestyle change that led to the weight gain? I'm curious because you're such an active guy.
Yeah.
What was your life like at that point?
It was a loss of structure. Okay. So final season of rowing came and went, and then I had no team structure. I was just starting to make money and not really thinking about, okay, well, I used to work out 2 to 3 hours a day. Now I'm working, but I'm still eating the same, or I'm eating like crap. And it kind of just crept up on me. I didn't even realize it until I was like, holy moly, I have to make a change. And that actually led me to buying a bike, of all things.
Okay.
So I had some friends that were biking, and so I bought a bike. I biked across Iowa a couple times, and that got me into triathlon. And so my buddy's like, hey, you should sign up for a triathlon. I couldn't swim, but I was like, sure. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do an Ironman. Because I've always been, this will be a theme that we'll get into later, but I've always kind of been go big or go home.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to do it, we're just going to
send it.
Do it. Yeah. Let's just do the thing. So literally didn't know how to swim, just got a bike, hadn't really started running yet, but signed up for an Ironman, and kind of just figured it out from there.
So how does that transition into the ultra running space? Because there's a clear path there, but they're definitely distinctly different.
Yeah, it's not a linear path for sure. So I had done 3 Ironman, and I was training for my 4th.
How'd you do in those?
My first one was just under 13 hours, and the last one I did was just over 10 hours.
Okay.
So I was definitely progressing in the sport, but I never liked swimming. It was something that just I can run on a treadmill for 24 hours, and my mind just kind of zones out. It's great. I can't zone out for one lap in a pool. It is just mental anguish the entire time. Training for swimming was miserable. And so this is actually kind of a funny story. I was training for my 4th Ironman, and I wasn't liking the process. I had just moved to Boulder from Chicago at the time. And I'm like, I'm in the mountains, and I'm training for a road race. This is like, what am I doing? And so I go out and do this race. There's a stroke and stride. So you swim, it's like swim 1,000 and then run a 5K.
Okay.
And it's like Tuesday night or something in Boulder, and it's just a really casual event. But I was about 100 yards into the swim, and somebody kicked me in the face really hard, and it broke my goggles, and I had an absolute meltdown in the water. I literally took my broken goggles and just chucked them across the lake.
No.
And then I slapped the water, swam back to the shore, took my wetsuit off, went home, and the next day I sold all my triathlon stuff.
Wow, thank God you got kicked in the face.
Yeah.
Dude.
So whoever, if I could go back and find out who was in that race and be like, hey, we probably started at the same time. You might be the reason that I'm now a pro trail runner.
Wow.
Because I got kicked in the face in the middle of a swim.
Oh my gosh. And in that moment, it probably feels like the world is ending.
This is just,
I'm worthless. This is stupid. I hate this.
yeah, I didn't want to be there already, and now I get kicked in the face. My goggle broke. We all know those days that you're just like, F the world. I'm done with this.
Yep.
And I doubled down, and I was actually done with it. And so I actually worked for a running shoe company at the time, and we were the title sponsor of Ironman Kona World Championship. So I went to Kona that year to work. And to this day, I've been on Strava for 8 or 9 years now. So this day I have one swim on my Strava. And it is, if you go to Kona, there's a coffee boat that they park 300 yards off the coast, and you can swim there and get free coffee in the morning. And literally my only swim on Strava is out to the coffee boat to swim with dolphins and get coffee and back. So I have 600 yards in the last 8 years of swimming.
That is incredibly on brand for you. It's I'm not doing this unless
there's coffee.
Involves coffee.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you put down the goggles, you're done with tries. Yep. How does that transition into the big mountain ultras?
Yeah, so I had a buddy pretty much at the same time from back in Chicago that was doing Leadville 100. And he wasn't just doing Leadville, he was doing Leadman, which is all of the series in Leadville through the summer. So you do the trail marathon, then you do the 50-mile mountain bike, 50-mile run, 100-mile mountain bike, 10K run, and then 6 days later do the 100-mile run.
Wow.
So I was pacing him. I said, hey, I'll pace you for the 100. And it was incredible. It was an amazing experience. And by the end of that race, I said, all right, I'm doing Leadman next year. And like I said, go big or go home. I committed right then and there to doing my first 100 and to doing that whole Leadman series the following year.
Oh, you're a psycho. Straight up psycho.
I think the consensus is yes.
How did you, because Leadville's kind of hard to get into. I applied this year and didn't get in. How did you end up getting into that?
So when you sign up for Leadman, you get to do it before the lotteries, and you pay one price and get into all the races.
What's that cost? I'm sure it's
when
different
I
now.
when I did it was $800, something like that. And now I want to say
way more than that.
Yeah. Now the mountain bike 100 is almost $800 these days, but it's probably $1,100 or $1,200 these days.
Because I feel
no idea.
The 100-mile run's what, $450?
Something like that.
So it's got to be a couple grand.
Yeah, they do bundle them and make it cheaper, but I'm sure it's $1,000, $1,200, something like that.
You just planted a little seed in my head with that Leadman thing. I'm thinking.
Well, you can bike, you can run.
Yeah,
it's the way to do it,
and it's not far away. I mean, Leadville's easy from here.
Yeah, it's a little over an hour. So
drive.
I think it's a really good way to get into the sport of ultra, and it sounds kind of crazy, but it forces you not to just 100% focus on running.
Yeah.
The reason a lot of ultra runners get injured is because they're like, oh, I'm going to be an ultra runner, and all they do is run. Well, that's where the repetitive use issues come up. That's where a lot of issues come up. But if you are running but also have to cycle 2 to 3 days a week, you're really helping your system adapt to a bigger training load without the impact.
Yeah, I think the same thing goes for running different surfaces.
Yep.
People, I feel, get hurt much quicker in the long distance road stuff because you're taking the same stride every time. But if you're going uphill, downhill, you're using all these different connective tissues, and half the time you're walking or power hiking.
Right.
You're doing so many different things. It's a lazy way that we just call it all ultra running. There's a lot of different stuff going into that.
So many things. And to your point, the most beat up I've ever felt 2 days after an event was after running on a treadmill for 24 hours. Because it's the same step for 24 hours. Nothing changes. Whereas ultra, like you said, you walk uphill, run downhill, jog the flats, and everything. Every step to some degree is different. Versus flat treadmill. Every step's the same.
Let's dive into that a little bit. So
let's do it.
Where did the idea come from? How did you come up with the idea? I guess a little background here for people that haven't heard. The idea is to run the furthest that anyone has ever run on a 24-hour treadmill. I don't know was there a previous record or
nobody had ever attempted. So yeah, 24 hours to see how far I could run on a non-motorized, so a manual treadmill.
Right.
And I feel like it's far enough from the event now that I can admit this on record, but the idea came from me trying to figure out how to get a free treadmill.
Okay. Respect.
Straight up.
Respect.
I was like, okay, what value could I show a brand to say like, hey, like, sponsor me with the treadmill? And so it worked out really well that 10,000 got me in touch with Assault Fitness. Assault Fitness is like, this dude's crazy. Hell yeah, let's do it. Sent me a treadmill, and they were all in. And I'm still working with them today. They're an absolutely incredible company and doing some amazing things in fitness. But that's straight honesty. That's the idea came from just trying to hustle a free treadmill.
So leading up to it, were you training on an assault runner, or how was that training?
Yeah, so I trained the first half of the year for Leadville. So I did Leadville 100 in August.
Okay.
And then from August to November, it was 140-mile weeks on the assault runner. Basically was my training plan.
But you didn't have one, so you were going to a gym?
No, I had one at that point. Yeah, they
did.
sent me one at the right before Leadville, so I got it in mid-July.
Gotcha.
Yep.
But at that point, you're committed. You're like, I got to do this. I got my free treadmill, so that's sick.
Yeah.
But I got to
well then 10,000 got behind it, and I have all of a sudden like they're like, okay, we're gonna have a full film crew there, and like it turned into really what I needed it to be to do something so hard. Is like, okay, this is a big thing for a lot of people, not just me, right? When you're doing something just for yourself, when it gets hard, you're like, well, nothing is keeping me from just stepping off. Mm-hmm. But in the middle of it, I mean, hour 12, 14, when things got really hard, but all of a sudden it's not about me anymore. It's okay. Assault Fitness believed in me. 10,000 believed in me. My family believed in me. All these friends that flew from all over the country to be here believed in me. It's something bigger than me at this point, and that's what kept me going on those last 10 hours.
That's important.
Yeah.
So when you're training for this, how did you decide on where you were going to do the actual attempt?
Yeah, so I basically wanted it to be at sea level,
sure.
Which is obvious. I live at almost 10,000 feet, and I train at 10,000 feet. My treadmill's in my living room at 10,000 feet. So a bit of an advantage if I could go to sea level.
Yeah.
And then talking with 10,000, they're based in New York City. The New York City Marathon was going on that week. We thought, hey, how cool would it be to kind of do it just 2 days before the New York City Marathon, and because there's going to be a lot of runners in town. We did it at the Lifetime Fitness, really close to the Javits Center, which is where the packet pickup is for the New York City Marathon. So we were like, okay, let's try to get some foot traffic of runners, because it was an open for Guinness to ratify something. You have to have it in a public place. You have to it has to be able to have witnesses that walk in whenever they want to make sure you're legit. So public place, close to the New York City Marathon, sea level. The timing was right for after Leadville to tack on more miles, and it just kind of worked perfectly to do it there.
Yeah, and I guess I'm a little privy to this because I'm working on some world record stuff, but I am learning that the process is not easy with Guinness. There is a lot that goes into that. There's a financial piece. There's time spent. There's a lot that goes into that. Tell me a little bit about how that worked out.
Yeah, and I'm still working on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we're 3 months post now, and it's still not officially ratified through Guinness. There's another company out of Germany that's called Record Holders. They have hosted it now, so it is officially hosted, at least on one site.
Congrats, dude.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So it exists. It's a real thing. Guinness is interesting. So Guinness used to be a book. I think we all remember, the Scholastic Fair where you get your Guinness book and you look through it.
Obsessed.
Right.
Obsessed.
Yeah.
Like
you're like, the best day of middle school, the freaking Scholastic Fair comes in, you look at there's the Guinness book right there. And
it's the biggest monkey in the world.
Yeah. The fingernail lady and like next.
The tattoo guy.
Yeah. So so Guinness used to be that. Once the internet became so popular, they really kind of became obsolete. So Guinness has become, for the lack of a better term, a marketing agency. And so their only way really of making money is by like trying to license their brand. And so that's where there are ways to host world records through Guinness, but everything for them tries to funnel back to like, give us money and we'll do this. Give us money and we'll do that. Like, oh, you're doing this for a brand? Well, like you can't use Guinness unless you pay. Literally, once they heard that I was doing this with 10,000, they're like, okay, it's going to be $16,000 for you to use our name. And so it's like they're just out to get money because they want to. They're like, then you can put our logo on your thing, and we'll put a banner up behind you. And it's like, well, I don't care if it's a Guinness World Record. I just want the world record, right? Guinness is meaningless to me. They're just a house for hosting. And once it got into the marketing agency stuff, I was a little turned off. But still, I think growing up in the era that we have, having a Guinness World Record has a little panache to it.
Yeah.
So I'm still going after it. I'm going the free route. Like I'm not paying them. So it's taking forever.
Yeah. And they don't hide it. You get on,
you
fill out your application. They go, okay, this is going to take forever.
Pay us
or
$1,000.
second option, you can pay us a bunch of money right now and we'll look at it next week.
Yeah, we'll prioritize it.
And it's like, oh, this is like a hustle.
Yeah.
Like, and I had no idea until I started the application process. I'm like, oh, okay, I see how this is working now. But they do have the household name.
Yes.
And that is so powerful. It's like you tell your grandma I have a Guinness World Record. She knows exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the ability for them to substantiate claims allows them to really charge a premium. So.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because we should honor and highlight people doing incredible things without, like, think about how inaccessible that is for most people to go do something incredible. If for us to like say that you did this incredible thing, it's going to be this much money.
Like a Tarahumara, like 80-year-old dude that can run like a sub-3 marathon. It's like he's never going to get a Guinness World Record for fastest 80-year-old.
Correct.
That's just a weird example, but it's never going to happen because he's not going to be able to pay $10,000.
Yeah, and then the other side of it is their rules are very strict, and I do understand that. I think there have to be very strict rules. But so, for example, for the 24-hour treadmill thing, we had to find 2 independent witnesses for a maximum of 4-hour shifts at a time for the duration of the event.
How does that look?
And so the challenge is independent means can't be associated with the facility that you're doing it in, any brand partners, or me. And so it's like, how do you then go about finding people? Like, what they can't know me, they can't know the brand, they can't know
hit
the
up
facility.
a follower because that's you.
They know me. And so we basically, I double checked it, and they're like, okay, they can know the brand, they just can't represent the brand.
Okay.
And so ultimately what we did is we put out feelers through 10,000 for followers that lived in New York City or were in New York City and got them to come in. And then there was all this paperwork that they had to fill out throughout the event. And so I have like a log of all of this stuff, and they had to sign off every 30 minutes on what they're watching and what they're witnessing. And then we had to certify the distance with a speed cadence sensor. And it's just, which I get, right? Like, there's a lot of smart people out there. You could edit the treadmill a little bit, so it's like 6-minute pace actual, but the thing shows 8-minute pace on the, or vice versa. So that part I get. It's just logistically, it's a lot harder to set a world record like this than most people think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I had no idea that there was so much that went into it.
So many hoops to jump through.
So you get to the race, and it's time to actually do the running.
Yep.
Was this an event that you were especially nervous for, or did you feel pretty good that day?
I felt terrible that day. I woke up and I almost couldn't breathe. Like, my throat was, again, this is the first time I'm saying this stuff publicly, but I don't know if I had COVID, but some of our people tested positive shortly thereafter, but my throat was basically swollen shut that morning. And we had to make an emergency run to the CVS to get a bunch of like numbing throat sprays. And like lozenges and stuff so I could even get to the facility that morning.
Oh
so
my God.
it was like, well, we're here. Let's make a go of it. And so, yeah, so we just went forward, and obviously it turned out as well as I could have. The throat situation didn't really bother me after the first probably 10 miles.
Okay.
It kind of, the body's just like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing. The body's really amazing that way. It kind of figures out that it doesn't really have a say in what's going to happen for the next, 20 hours. So it's just like, okay, well, I guess we'll stop putting up a fight.
Yeah, it is incredible. Like, especially with running, I feel like a lot of times there's something nagging, and then I get out there and get in the groove, and instantly it's gone, and I'm just in the zone.
Yeah, and this isn't advice to go run through an injury. This is, don't be like, oh, Don said on this podcast that if I just run through my broken leg, it'll fix itself. That's not what we're saying here.
Don said get COVID and then try a 24-hour attempt.
Yeah. It's the N of 1 data says it actually works.
So where was the low point? Because I mean, naturally in a 100-mile or 24-hour run, there's some low point. Where did it happen for you?
Yeah, it happened a lot sooner than I expected it to. First of all, so again, going with the repetitive use situation, if anybody's ever run on a manual treadmill or assault run, it's kind of hell on your hamstrings. And so I was mentally preparing for my hamstrings to be an issue. It happened a little sooner than I expected. So more like mile 40, 45. I was hoping more like 80. And then what that led to is some hip flexor things. And so that's physical. I can deal with physical, and I can run through physical. The challenge with running in place for 24 hours is that you have no, like, okay, I'm going to go run to that mountain peak or that aid station, or there's a person ahead of me. I'm just going to focus on them right now. It just amplifies any pain or discomfort you're having by just staring at a wall for 24 hours. So the mental anguish started a little sooner than I expected. Not even 12 hours in, and I'm like really mentally struggling. And then that lasted probably 4 or 5 hours of just, this is terrible. I mean, it became to the point where I had kind of convinced myself in my head that I wasn't even going to get 100 miles in, that I was going to totally miss that 100-mile mark, and that, like, whatever, like, it is what it is, but this is the day that I have today. And this is where the story kind of gets interesting and fun, is that I have this good buddy. He lives in Estes Park. His name's Taylor. And he, out of the blue, because we had a live stream the whole time. And so he was watching it, and he could see my body language was just like total crap. And so he sent this really stupid GIF of Goofy, Disney's Goofy, to my wife, and he's like, hey, show this to Don. And it's this GIF from this really stupid cartoon that him and his kids were over at my house one day, and they were watching this cartoon, and it's like quite possibly the worst song in the world, but it gets stuck in your head and it just makes you laugh. And it's and so he sent my wife that GIF, and she just goes, hey, like, Taylor wants you to see this. And so it made me just like, God damn it, Taylor, like, because now I've got this hot diggity dog stuck in my head. And it just made me kind of laugh. And I was like, all right, you know what we need right now? We need some Disney music. And so I'm talking like 2 a.m. We're at this point, the gym is closed. So the doors are locked, but we still have 15 people or something in the lobby with me. And like, it's kind of, we've had music on the whole time, but we're like, okay. So I've always used I Just Can't Wait to Be King as a challenge song for me from Disney. And right. And so I'm like, okay, like, let's cue up I Just Can't Wait to Be King. And everybody's like, oh, like, it's on. And we turned my low point into a freaking Disney sing-along dance hour at like 2 a.m. in the middle of a lobby in a gym in downtown Manhattan.
Oh my God.
And it totally turned the night around. And all of a sudden, my like struggling to get 12, 13, 14-minute miles turned back into, 8, 9-minute miles. And I'm smiling again, I'm eating again. And it's amazing the power of the mind that I'd kind of given up on myself a little bit. And then just that one stupid GIF made me laugh and realize that, you know what, I get to be doing this right now. Like, there's people in this world that are running from stuff that you and I will never be able to comprehend. And I'm somebody is believing in me to fly me to New York City, put me on this treadmill, and supporting me completely to do this. Like, what an honor and privilege this is. And it totally turned my mindset around into like, this is amazing. I'm here with some of the coolest people I know in one of the best cities in the world. Like, what a time to be alive. And it just, it changed the whole perspective of that night.
The mindset is everything.
It's amazing. And having, I learned something every time I race or every time I challenge myself. And that might be one of the most important lessons I've ever had, is like, if I'm going through a low point, just take a deep breath, even stop. I don't care if you're racing for a first place, stop, take a second, collect yourself, collect your thoughts, think about something positive, because then when you get back to running, if you're in a positive mindset, you're going to be running so much better and so much more effortlessly than you were before, laboring through those negative thoughts.
It's interesting because there's kind of these two schools of thoughts with ultra runners. Like there's kind of that school of thought, and then there's kind of like the Goggins school of thought, which is like, just suffer and be hard and like just keep going and don't be a little bitch. And it's like I don't know that one is necessarily right or wrong, but I know one of them works for me.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place for each of those mindsets. I was out. I've been just during my long runs recording my thoughts sometimes now. I've never really documented the crap I think about, and just last 2 weekends ago, maybe it was last weekend, I don't know. It was like I woke up, I was gonna get a 20-mile run in, and it was like 4 degrees below zero. I was like, you know what? No. It's okay to sleep in or to drink coffee a little bit longer or to do something else and then go out. And while I was in the middle of my run, I was having an incredible run, and it was 15 degrees and the sun was out. And I just recorded, I said, you know what? Sometimes the best version of your run happens if you wait 2 hours. Like you're not weak because you're waiting. You just know that I'm going to get more out of my run when it's 15 degrees than I will if it's negative 5 degrees. Yeah. So it's like, I would rather you stay healthy, stay happy than staying hard.
Mm-hmm. And the key is to have like a long-term mindset. So like if you get mad at yourself for staring at your shoes for too long and putting that run off, and then all of a sudden say I hate running, it's like if you would have just waited or gone through the motions or do something nice and easy, do some mobility or something instead, and then run tomorrow, it's like, well, the long term, that one's going to benefit you a lot more from slugging out like 5 terrible miles in miserable conditions and you're hating it.
Yeah, and I have a good friend that his mindset, and he's a coach and coaches high school cross country, and he always asks his team, are you training for your toughest race or are you training for your fastest race? If you're training for your toughest race, maybe there's some credibility to going out when it's -4 just to work on that mindset. But if you're trying to train for your fastest race, whether 5K, 10K, marathon, or even for me going really fast for 100 miles, like the best bet is to run in the conditions where you can run your fastest and your safest, and that is not when it's below zero.
Wow. And that's coming from a guy that's living up in the mountains in really hard conditions. Yeah, and I one of the mindsets around the treadmill is knowing that I've run on the treadmill a lot in my life, just because I'm willing to just say, you know what, it's below zero right now and I have 20 miles. I can run safely and not worry about ice or my lungs getting damaged because I'm running outside. I'd happily run on a manual or even a motorized treadmill. What's the case for each one of those, a manual versus a motorized treadmill?
Yeah, so I have both in my quiver right now. I primarily run on the manual just because I feel like it gives me probably the most accurate road feel of being outside, and it's just mentally harder, to be totally honest. Like it gives you that little extra challenge. And then I use the motorized for hill stuff. So if I'll even use both of them concurrently, where I'm doing longer flat intervals on the manual, and then I have the motorized set at 15% grade, and then I'll jump on and just do like a really hard hill climb, and then I'll go back and forth. So kind of replicating what a trail might feel like if you're running to a mountain, you're running up the mountain, and then you're back on flat or downhill. So kind of using both.
I think I guess for people that haven't used a manual treadmill, it's still a little bit more of a niche thing. you don't realize how much harder it is. So for folks out there that haven't tried one, it's curved.
Yeah, it's like a bean shape.
Yeah,
it's the best way to think about it.
And your legs, actually, the first couple strokes, you have to pull it to get it going like a hamster wheel.
Yes.
And then once you've got it going, it starts to spin. Then you can kind of pick up your momentum and set a pace.
Yep.
But a lot of it is generated first, at least initially, by your own power.
Yeah. My hamstrings right now are stronger than they've ever been. Even going to the gym and working with the trainer, they're like, "Holy crap! Like, your hamstrings are way stronger than any runner I've ever worked with." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I just trained for 3 months pretty exclusively on a freaking assault runner."
I'm pulling back.
Yeah, it's all pulling.
Time. That's interesting. I wonder how that will like manifest itself in your trail running and your ultras, if that will give you a big boost.
It has. I can tell you just right now, right here, is that I feel stronger than I ever have on trails, specifically on uphills. Because so the assault runner, people say anywhere from 2 to 4% grade is kind of what it translates to outside. And I can tell you, I can feel that if I get on a 3% grade, I have all the power in the world. Whereas 6 months ago, that might not have been the case. So sure. I think of any type of indoor training, the assault runner has definitely given me a boost in my outdoor running more than anything else.
That's awesome. So how far did you actually make it on the 24-hour treadmill?
So it was 114 and a quarter miles.
I could probably beat that, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, somebody already told me that they were going to beat it, and then he started training and decided not to do it. His long run was like 20 miles on it.
That's a good move on his part.
Yeah.
Is that the furthest you've ever ran?
No, that's not even maybe top 5. The longest I've ever run was a race called Spartathlon, which is from Athens to Sparta in Greece.
Okay.
It's 153 miles.
Wow.
I've done a couple of backyard races that were both in the 130, 140 range.
So explain backyard race to somebody that's listening to this.
Yeah, so the format is every hour on the hour you run 1.46 miles. So that means if I run 1.46 miles in, let's say, 45 minutes, I can then sit down, rest, refuel, and relax for 15 minutes before the bell goes off for that next lap.
And this isn't on a track. It's like
it's a trail, real trails, or it's called a backyard race because it originated in Lazarus Lake's backyard. Literally, he had a 4-something mile loop in his backyard, and he's like, "Wouldn't it be cool just to see how far we can go doing one loop an hour?" And so 1.46 miles comes out to exactly 100 miles in 24 hours is kind of the idea behind the distance there. But yeah, the race continues until only one person is left in the last loop. So there's no real finish line and there's no fixed length. So I've done it twice. The first time I had a anterior tibialis partial tear at like mile 7 and then made it to 129. And before my foot couldn't bear weight anymore, I just kept falling. So I called it quits that day. And then the last time I did it, I got to like 130 something miles, upper 130s, and I started hallucinating really bad because I hadn't been able to sleep and I hadn't been able to rest my mind, and I didn't sleep well the night before, and I just kept seeing the trees were pants. Like literally the forest was made of denim pants and jeans. Yeah, like jeans and khakis. And then I was like, this isn't right. And then I thought I was seeing other runners because there was like 8 people left or something. I was like, okay, I'm going to follow them. And it was just a tree, and I would just run into trees.
Oh my God.
And so I had told my crew, I was like, at this point, it's just dangerous.
Wow.
Like I just need to drop out. So I dropped out of that race. But and then I've also done Badwater, which is 135 miles through Death Valley in July. And so the year I did it, I think it got up to 127 degrees. Yeah, it's really, really hot. And then people think that's a flat race. It's not. It has 18,000 feet of climbing because you start from Badwater Basin at negative 200 feet, and you go up to the portal of Mount Whitney at almost like 9,000 feet. And you go over 3 or 4 mountain passes along the way.
And you're on burning hot cement.
Yeah, you're on pavement the whole way. Yeah. So I mean, the pavement temperature is in like the 160s, 170s, something like that. And
shoes, rubber, literally burning off. Is the Badwater, you think, the hardest race in the country?
This is going to be a triggering response, but I don't even think it's the hardest race I've done.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's just depend on, like, pick your hard, right? Some people pavement for 135 miles when it's 130 degrees. That sounds hard to a lot of people. I don't mind the heat. I do really well in the heat, and the pavement doesn't bother me. This race, Cruel Jewel, that I did just this past year in May, it's 106 miles in the North Georgia mountains with 33,000 feet of climbing. And it's all like round river rock trail where it's every step you take, you can blow out your ankle. I think that's probably the hardest race I've ever done.
Interesting. I've never even heard of that. There's so many wild ultras that like I don't even know about, because it's almost like the more obscure and like underground they are, like the more mystique they have.
Yeah. I mean, then you have things like the Barkley, right? It's hard to even put that in a category. That's only like 14 or 15 finishers and 30 something years of that race.
I don't know if the Barkley, and this is from a novice that knows nothing about ultra running, I think of the Barkley as a land nav adventure race.
Yeah,
I don't think it's an ultra
That's
marathon.
what I'm saying. It's kind of in its own category, because you could technically, if you're a really great navigator and a great hiker, you could totally finish that race in 60 hours.
For sure.
But the challenge is finding that intersection, and then just those trails are really treacherous.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nasty bush.
Not even trail. Yeah,
It's
there's
like, just
the
like,
bramble and
exactly. How bad do you want to get cut up?
Yeah. And so and the weather at Frozen Head State Park is it'll be 60 degrees when you start, and then nighttime it's 15 degrees and blizzard.
Have you heard the story about how they came up with the Barkley marathons?
I've heard a few different variations, but basically weren't they like talking about this? So it's the guy that assassinated somebody was in that prison, right? And he made it after like 2 days. He made it like 5 miles or something, and not very far.
Like basically a stone's throw.
James Earl Ray, I think it was.
He was like a stone's throw from. I mean, in running world, like he wasn't very far, and it had been like 3 days or something. Yeah. And they found him like under a log. And they were like, oh, well, we could go further through this terrain. Like, let's do a race here, and kind of spark the idea for this crazy bushwhacking navigation race. Yeah,
so this race, the race we're talking about right now is Barkley's. The same race director that came up with that is the guy that basically invented the backyard style, that 4.16 mile loop.
What's his name?
Lazarus Lake.
And he's a real interesting character.
He's fascinating to talk to. He is brilliant, like truly brilliant, but more on the evil genius side when it comes to running. So he has other races. This race coming up where like it doesn't tell you the route or anything. And I think it's in Alabama or something this year. I can't even think of the name of it, but it's like 400 miles, and he just hands you a map and says go, and you just got to figure it out.
He's got some real skills though when it comes to land nav. Like you couldn't be able to put on the kind of stuff he does with any without ill intent, like putting people in that situation without really knowing the land intimately.
Yeah, and he does, and he's an active outdoorsman. Although he's walked across the U.S. like from west to east. Just walking. He just loves being outdoors. He has a map of Tennessee where he lives, and he's walked every highway up and down, and his goal before he dies is to walk every road in Tennessee. And
that's wild.
He's an interesting character. And then you hear all these stories about all these running things he's done and like walking, and then the dude smokes a pack a day. And,
just heaters.
Yeah, just
like
constantly, and drinks Dr. Pepper all day. Like, so it's like, on paper, he's the picture of health. I'm like, God, he's outside doing all this stuff. And then you meet him, and he's like, just chain smoking Marlboro Reds and drinking Dr. Pepper.
And he's got one thing I love about the idea of the Barkley is that it costs almost nothing to get in.
Yeah, $1.60.
Yeah, $1.67 or something.
Yeah.
And you got to bring whatever he asks you to bring. And sometimes he says it's whatever he needs.
Yeah,
like
shirts
socks
or underwear.
Or like a flannel. And that's what you got to bring to get in the race.
Yeah, he's when I went down and did Big Backyard, so it's the original backyard race in his backyard. It was the first year it was the World Championships there, and he would just like talk to everybody, believing like they were going to be the world champion, and like live it. He's like, oh, what are you doing standing? You got a world championship to win this weekend. Like, it's just, he is just so authentic, believing in the athlete. But at the same time, he hates crew.
Wow.
He's like, if you bring crew, like you're being a pussy because you have all this help. He's like, no, he's like, I walked across the country by myself. You can run a few laps in my backyard without crew. You don't need to be coddled.
Wow.
And so he loves the athletes. He hates people that are there to help them.
Wow. He's just like the epitome of old school.
Yo, super old school.
Just such a different mindset than a lot of the ultras that are going on now, where it's like big vendors and like crew has specific instructions.
Look at what UTMB is doing, where they're packing the trails with like 5,000 people in France, and it's just they're getting some backlash right now of being too commercialized and everything's money because they partnered with Ironman, and it's just.
I feel like it is more of a tier 1 sport there.
Yeah.
Like ultra running, I guess because the culture is seen as like those are the superheroes out there versus like our ultra runners here aren't even household names really.
Yeah, we have two. I mean, you have Jim Walmsley and Courtney DeWalter.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a ton more in the US, but you go to Chamonix and it's okay, who are the household names in the US? There might be a handful more, but those are pretty much the first people I think people are going to bring up, and they're going to have a short list.
Yeah, Killian Jornet.
Yeah,
I feel like he's on that list.
Killian, Francois, but those are all the Europeans, right? Like, they're Tom Evans, and there's just so many fast Europeans that they have been born and bred and running around Mont Blanc. So we just don't have that premier event other than Western States, and it's so flipping hard to get into Western States that it kind of loses some of the allure for U.S. trail running. When here's the premier ultra race in the U.S. and it's pretty freaking impossible to get into.
Right. What's the so we talked about the 100-mile, which I mean obviously was a grueling event, but it turned out really well. What is the race that sticks into your mind as like the biggest disaster, like where everything fell apart? And
well, probably Leadville, 2 Leadvilles ago, where I ended in the hospital would probably be that answer. I was running a pretty good race, and all of a sudden things didn't feel right. It's so hard to explain, but it got really hard and earlier than it should have. And that led, my heart rate went up, my respiratory rate went up. And then, so I ran a good race. I was, kind of, within striking distance of the lead pack for the first 38 miles. And then things were slowing down from there. And then I got back to mile 68 and I just said like something's not right, but we're going to keep moving. And so I kept moving on for, another 20 something miles. And we were going up pretty much the last big climb up power line. And my heart rate was in the 180s. My pulse ox got down into the 50s. Wow. And so I would sit down for 10 minutes. My heart rate wasn't coming down. My pulse ox wasn't changing. I was like gasp breathing, and they're like, something's seriously wrong. And so we basically called my crew and said, hey, like meet us at the road. We're pulling the plug. And luckily my pacer at the time he's a world champion mountain biker. Like he knows like when to push through and when to like, this is dangerous. And so he was the one that made the call. He's like, dude, not your day. Like, we're going to make sure that you have a tomorrow that it could be your day, because like, this isn't good. So we went to the medics, and then we went to the hospital and spent the next 4 hours in the hospital getting chest x-rays and everything. And long story short here is that 2 years ago we had a really bad wildfire season. Yeah. And where I live, wildfire sits in the valley, or smoke sits in the valley, and I'd been training in it. And what had basically happened is that my lungs had swollen and gotten basically swollen from wildfire inhalation, repeated exposure to wildfire, so that when I went out and tried to run 100 miles, they're just like, nope, we can't. We could do the first 30 something miles, but once you're straining your lungs that much anyways at the end of an ultra, they pretty much my lungs function started shutting down. Wow.
It's like as if you were the Barclays guy just smoking packs of cigarettes.
Yeah, it basically what it was. And so and they were able to diagnose it pretty quickly because they're like, yeah, so the mountain bike races the weekend before, we had 5 or 6 athletes in with the exact same symptoms.
Wow.
He's like, we have 2 other runners in here now with the exact same symptoms, and they're all from the same area that you live in.
So all of the people who are training all those mountain miles got the same kind of respiratory issue.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, I had never heard of it either. I never even thought about it.
How do you fix it?
Time.
You just gotta chill.
Yeah, no exposure to smoke. And so they did give me an inhaler to help with the inflammation. So I was on an inhaler for just a little bit to get the inflammation down to help clear the lungs. But yeah, it was just... I took a bunch of adaptogens and herbs and stuff that help with healthy lung function and just not straining your lungs. So I couldn't really go out and do hard work, get the respiratory rate up high. I was focusing on low respiratory activities. And then I also started implementing a lot more breath work at that time to try to strengthen the lungs and get them a little bit better producing oxygen and holding carbon dioxide and all that stuff.
Is that kind of the phase that brought you into the focused meditation state? Like, was that the bridge there?
I had always dabbled or thought about it, but I never focused on it. And that was definitely this is something that's important.
Right. Because that's a big part of your life. The meditation, the breath work. I know that you're pretty committed to that.
Yeah. So pretty much every day these days starts with 10 to 15 minutes of breath work. And then midday, I always have time blocked off on my work calendar to go sit down and meditate. And then the end of the day is, sauna, cold plunge type mind work.
How does it look for you if it's somebody that's listening, they've never done meditation? What does your meditation look like?
It depends. So I basically have 3 different approaches to meditation. One is guided meditation. So, use an app. Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer, whatever. Find something and just do that. And so those are a lot more just like body focus. You kind of do a body scan. You focus on your breathing, but while also, let's focus on your toes, focus on your calf, focus on your thighs, and just just kind of going through body scans. It's really a really good one. The second pillar of meditation I use is visualization. Mm-hmm. So I'll use this a little bit closer to races, but so basically I'll go online, and if it's a race I've never done before, and I'll just watch videos of the races. So I have clips of the course and things like that in my mind. And then when I meditate, I'll actually meditate on those clips. So I'll think about the course. I'll think about watching myself go through the finish line, hopefully in first place. Just visualize the success that you expect. And so a lot of just going through, what does the perfect morning look like? What does the perfect race look like? What does me winning look like? What does the podium feel like? And just really convincing yourself that this is going to be. And then the third one is really the opposite of all that, or it's just clear the mind. Mm-hmm. So this is where it takes a little bit longer for people that are new to meditation is like, how do you clear your mind? And then there's really no right way of doing that. But what I do is it's really easy, that especially in the middle of a work day, to think about, I have these meetings coming up. Just acknowledge the thought and then clear it. So I actually visualize a broom in my head and a dustpan, and if I'll take that thought, and in my head I'll just sweep it into the dustpan and throw it away, and then I'll clear my mind.
I like that.
And then the more you do that, the longer those stretches of just clear brain go.
That's really important. I really like the idea of the visualization too for the ultra running specifically, because I kind of do the other one too, which is visualize the down moments. Visualize coming through, visualize what that pain feels like, and coming out on the other side of that. Like, not just the positives, but also visualize yourself coming through that low point. It's really helped me.
Yeah, it prepares you, because I had an old coach that says don't always just visualize the perfect day, but visualize the imperfect day. Mm-hmm. Of, hey, if it's pouring rain and you're chafing and you dropped your gel and don't have food, like, are you gonna sit and cry on the side of the trail? And I'll be totally honest, sometimes the answer is yes. But at some point you got to get up and keep moving. And what does that look like? What does it look like to get back up and get moving?
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
What speaking on your perfect day and crossing the finish line in first, Give me a little insight into this recent victory you had. I got to kind of watch and follow along with that.
Yeah. So I went down to Arizona for Coldwater Rumble. Last year I won the 52-mile race. So this year I came back to defend my title. And so obviously I know what it feels like to win there. Mm-hmm. And I kind of had some fun this year is the best way to put it. So the field was pretty deep this year, and I knew there was going to be some really good athletes that were going to be there. So I went out a little harder than I normally would, and somebody came with me, and we were chit-chatting, and he's like, you ran this last year, right? And so I'm not huge on mind games, but I was like, well, you're going to hang with me. I'm going to kind of get in your head a little bit right off the bat. And so I said, yeah, I won it last year, but I went out way too hard and I kind of died at the end. And so this year I'm just going out really controlled, knowing while I'm saying this, I'm going out hard. And so I was like, yeah, so this is just like really controlled this year. And long story short, I dropped him like a quarter mile into the race, and I ran the next 51 3/4 miles solo and ended up beating that guy by 40 minutes or something like that. But I'm not huge on mind games, but it's like, if he thinks I'm going easy at that point, and he's like, oh shit, like I gotta back up. If this guy said last year he went out too hard, and so he dropped off early, and then so it actually got really hard because last year somebody ran the first, because it's two 20-mile loops and then a 12-mile loop. It's 52 miles. And so last year, somebody ran the entire first 20-mile loop with me before dropping off. And so I only ran the last 32 solo. This year I was alone, quarter mile, third of a mile into the race. And so it got really hard mentally, just literally being alone for that long. And so I looked at it as a really good opportunity of digging deep into the mental pain cave, of saying, this is hard mentally, but it's going to pay off. I know I can do this physically, but let's dig a little deeper mentally. So whenever I started feeling bored or tired or something like that, I would just pick up the pace a little bit. I say, like, you know what? I am bored and tired. Let's go a little faster. Yeah.
That's important. In between the laps, did you have a crew with you, or were you doing it yourself?
I had other people out there, but I didn't really have a dedicated crew. So in between the laps, I had a little chair set up with a bag, and so I would just switch bottles out. And then the last time I came through, my friends had finished shorter races. So I had one friend in the 50K and 3 friends doing a half marathon. And so they were all done. So they were able to hand off a bottle real quick for me too.
It sounds like a small thing, but it's really nice to have someone there, like it's the mental thing. Cause when you're at that point, like thinking about hydrating and getting the food in your hands is like a whole thing in its own.
Yeah. And it's just, for me, the emotional pick me up of seeing friends, cause it's on those long days out on the trails, when you're just kind of in your own head thinking about whatever the hell you've been thinking about for the last 6 hours, and all of a sudden you see your best buddy like cheering for you. It's amazing how strong in ultra running emotional and psychological pick-me-ups can be, and it probably more than any other sport, because if you're going for 24 hours or longer, like, if you're in, and we've talked about this a little earlier, if you're in those really dark patches, that could take hours off of your finish time. So if you can get that emotional pick me up, suddenly like, oh, I'm back in the game. My pity party's over. I remember, so this guy Shad, who is one of my absolute best friends in the world, he was at this race, and he had finished the half marathon, and he had paced the aforementioned Cruel Jewel race that I said was the hardest race I've ever done. He was pacing the last section of me when I was just in the worst place, and I was kind of throwing moving temper tantrums is the best way to put it. And he's like, you know what? It's like, you're going to sit down, you're going to have a cry, I'm going to call your wife, and we're going to take 3 minutes, and we're going to get up and go. And like stuff like that sometimes is just like, shit, yeah, the 3 minutes we took there just saved me an hour.
Right. Yeah. It ends up being a really good net benefit.
Yeah.
It's crazy And it's innate. Like, you're not thinking about it when you see your crew and you have tingly skin and you like almost get emotional.
Oh,
like,
God,
it's
yeah.
such a big deal to you just seeing some familiar face when you're in that low of a state.
And it's not just that short moment of time you see your crew. It's 5 miles before when you're like, oh my God, I get to see my crew. I get to see my wife. I get to see my family within an hour. And then it's all of a sudden that's that carrot. When you're going through that low patch, it's like, yes, like my emotional support crew is there and within an hour, and then it's within a mile, and then it's like, yes. And then you're almost, by the time you get to them, they don't even know you've gone through a rough patch because you're just so excited to see them that you're already feeling great again.
Jazzed up.
Yeah.
Already. It's like, oh yeah, you did great. Everything was great the whole time.
Yeah,
But
they have
really,
no
they
idea.
don't know you just had a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, the other piece of it is like pacers. When you get to pick up a pacer,
Yep.
like, well, all I have to do is get to mile 55 or
Yep.
whatever the mile is, and then I have a running buddy the rest of the 12 hours or however long it takes you. It's like, well, I can run with somebody else. I just am tired of running alone.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah, it can get dangerous to be alone with your thoughts in the middle of a race.
It's something that not very many people experience.
No, but it's both really good and really bad.
It's so good.
You
for
learn so much about yourself in those moments, and you know, it's going through those tough moments by myself in races have made me a better husband, better employee, better friend, because you just know, like, hey, this sucks, but I'm gonna come through it. And then you can kind of approach things from those perspectives that I've intentionally done something very hard that is going to put me into the pit of despair, but I can overcome it. And it's obviously a short moment in time, but it's any time I face other obstacles in my life now, it's like, okay, well, I got through that. I can get through this.
If everything's easy, your ego is just going to swell.
Right.
You know, it's like those moments where you're completely beat down, where you remember, like, okay, I need to be grateful for what I have. I need to be really kind and nice to people. It's like when you're at your lowest, you realize where you have room to improve.
Totally. Nobody's ever gotten better or improved their life by doing easy things. Like,
So true.
do hard things, and you learn, you grow, and hopefully you help teach other people along the way too.
What is the best advice? It could be on ultra running or not, but what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Gosh, that's an hour conversation in itself, probably. I think probably the best advice and the best thing I've ever focused my mindset around is just enjoying the journey and just understanding the privilege that I have to be able to do what I do. There's just so many people in the world that have to just do what they do to survive, and I get to do this and enjoy it and have fun. So it's a privilege. Every time out, even on my worst day, I want to be known as like the happiest guy on the trail because I get to be there. And just somebody once told me, it's like, because I ran a race and I won, and they're like, oh my God, did you see this? Like, it was the most beautiful, I don't even remember what it was, but a landmark. And I'm like, no, I didn't see it at all. My head was down. I was focused on winning. I'm like, dude, he's like, you can still win a race and take the time to notice the beauty around you, to thank every volunteer, to experience. So that's probably the best advice I had, is like, just be aware of the experience that you're in and the privilege that you can be there by looking around. Don't just stare at your shoes the whole time like I did that first time I was out there, and I didn't remember this thing that everybody's like, oh my God, it's like the biggest landmark, you could see it. I was like, I literally don't remember it at all.
Just missed it.
Just totally missed it because I was so hyper focused on like win. And now it's like, okay, I can win, but I'm gonna look around. I'm gonna catch the sunrise. Like at Leadville this year, you run around Turquoise Lake and then you go up to Sugarloaf Pass, and the sun's coming up at that time. What is me taking 15 seconds, stopping, turning around, looking at the sunrise, and then all the little headlights around Turquoise Lake? That 15 seconds isn't going to win or lose me that race, but like emotionally and spiritually, it's going to fulfill me for well past this race.
Wow. Yeah, that's great advice. I'm going to try and keep that in mind.
Yeah, don't burn 15 seconds. It's worth it.
It's worth it. That's right. Well, Don, I think we could talk for about 6 more hours about running and being in the mountains, but I had a great time. I'm very grateful that you blessed me with your presence and all of your crazy adventures and knowledge about ultra running. So
Yeah, man. Well, so honored to be on the show. It's inspirational to know you in general and see all the crazy stuff you're doing. Someday you got to teach me how to get a bird to land on my hand. But yeah, let's talk again after my next race.
Cool, man. Appreciate you. All right, y'all. Stay wild. Peace.